Good afternoon and welcome to the ARC's monthly webinar series. I'm Peter Cook, I'm the Director of Stakeholder Relations. Just wanted to let everybody know in advance that we're being recorded and that we'll post a recording of the webinar to our website once it's completed. We do have a Q&A app that you can use to ask questions, and we kindly ask that you refrain from asking any until the webinar is over and or the presentation is over and we reach the question section. Again, thanks so much for attending today, and I'm going to hand it over to Lee McHarg, our Director of Employer Resources, who's going to walk us through an employee onboarding success overview.
Thank you, Peter. Welcome to the Employee Onboarding Success presentation. As Peter said, my name is Lee McHarg, and I'm the Director of Employer Resources for the ARC of Central Chesapeake Region. Today, I will be walking you through the onboarding process. Next. Today, I will be reviewing the employee onboarding process, the required documentation, common errors to avoid, our communication process, the clearance process, and the location of helpful forms and resources for your success. Next. These are the essential documents in the new hire packet that I'm going to review for you first. All of these forms must be completed and submitted for your new hire paperwork to be considered complete. The forms are available on the ARC's website, the link to which is at the end of this presentation. Next. The applicant data and payroll form is the first form in the new hire packet. Its use is similar to that of a job application. Page 1 identifies the participant employer, the applicant, and the certification dates. This form is also used to initiate the criminal background check process. Copies of CPR, first aid, and support broker certifications are required to be submitted with the new hire packet. DDA guidelines require both CPR and first aid training to be completed with an in-person skills component to be considered compliant. Virtual skills training is not acceptable for CPR or for first aid. Next. Page 2 of the applicant data and payroll form identifies service codes and pay rates. Common errors on the applicant data and payroll form include missing or incomplete full legal names, missing signatures, illegible email addresses, and unclear service codes and rates. Requested rates must be included in the budget and cannot exceed approved amounts. Rates and service codes must also match the family as staff form. We recommend including service codes such as holidays and paid time off at the time of application. Next. Section 1 of the I-9 form is to be completed, signed, and dated by the applicant. Section 2 is to be completed by the participant employer. It is not necessary to submit copies of applicant identification. However, a standard procedure must be established by the participant employer to ensure consistent business practices. So what does this mean? If you require copies of identification for one applicant, you must require it for all applicants. Page 1 must be signed and dated by both the applicant and participant employer. Please leave the first day of employment blank. This date will be established once clearance for the participant to start working is submitted to the team. Next. Common errors to avoid in Section 1 of the I-9 include missing Social Security number, missing date of birth, incomplete address, and unchecked citizenship or immigration status box. Next. Common errors to avoid in Section 2 of the I-9 include incomplete or inaccurate documentation in List A or List B and C. Please always refer to page 2 of the I-9 for a complete list of acceptable documents. Please leave the first day of employment blank. Avoid missing relationship status for legal guardians. And avoid using expired I-9 form. The current form expires on 7/31/26. Next slide, please. To successfully complete the W-4 form, the applicant is responsible for entering their full legal name, social security number, complete home address, and selecting their marital status. If an applicant wishes to claim dependents, the instructions direct them to select $2,000 per child under the age of 17 and $500 for each adult dependent. Both the participant and the applicant must complete the bottom portion of the form. We recommend that applicants seek guidance from their tax advisor if they're unsure how to complete this form. Next. Common errors to avoid on the W-4 form include incomplete full legal name or use of nicknames, missing social security number, incomplete address, missing marital status, entering number of dependents instead of a dollar value in step 3, entering a dollar value and claiming exemption from taxes. Applicants can only choose one of these options, and submitting an expired document. Next. To successfully complete the MW-507 form, the applicant is responsible for entering their full legal name, social security number, full street address, including city, state, and zip code, and county of residence. If the applicant lives outside of Maryland, they should enter the county in which they are employed. Next, ensure that the applicant has selected their marital status. If the applicant wishes to claim dependents, they will enter that number into line 1. If claiming no dependents, please instruct the applicant to enter 0 in line 1. We do not assume the applicant is claiming 0 when this line is left blank. If the applicant wishes to claim exempt, they should follow the instructions related to exemptions in lines 3 through 8. The applicant must sign and date the bottom of the form. Once again, we recommend that applicants seek guidance from their tax advisor if they are unsure how to complete this form. Next. Common errors to avoid on the MW-507 include incomplete full legal name or use of nickname, missing social security number, incomplete address, missing county of residence, marital status not being selected, entering a number of dependents in line 1 and also claiming exempt, and submitting an expired form. Next. The Paycom direct deposit form must be completed by all applicants, including those who wish to waive direct deposit. Multiple direct deposits are acceptable, and if an applicant wishes to waive direct deposit and receive a paper check, please instruct them to write waive on the form, then fully complete and sign and date the yellow highlighted sections at the bottom of the form. Next. Common errors to avoid on the Paycom form include not selecting checking or savings, entering the account number or routing number on incorrect lines, missing the bank name altogether, and missing a signature or deed. Next. The employee agreement is a legally binding contract between the participant employer and the applicant. After reading the agreement, the applicant must sign and date page 3 of the form in addition to printing their full legal name. The participant employer must sign and date as well in addition to printing their full legal name. Next. Here are some common errors to avoid on the employee agreement. We must have documentation of legal guardianship on file. Parents who are the legal guardian applying to work for their child cannot sign their own new hire paperwork on behalf of the participant employer. Instead, we encourage the participant to sign if they are able. If they are not, the participant's name can be typed, a signature stamp can be used, or the participant's name can be printed as signature. No abbreviated names or nicknames are acceptable. If a legal guardian is signing an applicant's paperwork on behalf of the participant, please notate their relationship clearly on all paperwork. Next. The special tax exemption form must be completed by all applicants. Page 1 is related to parents and step-parents of participants. If the applicant is a participant's parent or step-parent, they must indicate yes. Choosing yes will exempt the applicant from paying Social Security and Medicare taxes. This exemption cannot be waived. Next. Page 2 of the special tax exemption form is related to a participant's children and stepchildren. If the applicant is a participant's child or stepchild and they are under the age of 21, they must indicate yes. Choosing yes will exempt the applicant from paying Social Security and Medicare taxes until the age of 21. This exemption also cannot be waived. Next. Page 3 of the special tax exemption form is related to all caregivers who share the same legal residence with the participant full-time, regardless of relationship to the participant. Choosing yes will exempt the applicant from paying state and federal taxes. However, this exemption can be waived. If the exemption applies and the applicant chooses to elect the benefit, instruct them to select yes, then sign, date, and print their full legal name. The participant employer must also sign, date, and print their full legal name. The applicant will also complete the MW 507 and W4 forms claiming the tax exemption. Both the special tax exemption form and the tax forms must match. One form does not trump the other. To continue to claim this exemption, updated tax forms must be submitted annually by February 15th. If the special tax exemption for live-in caregivers applies, but the applicant chooses to waive, instruct them to select yes for question 3, write waive on the form, then sign, date, and print their legal name. The participant employer must also sign, date, and print their full legal name. Next. Common errors to avoid on the special tax exemption form include unanswered questions, missing applicant and/or participant signatures or dates, incomplete full legal name or use of nicknames, applicants who are legal guardians signing their own new hire paperwork on behalf of the participant, missing relationship status for legal guardians, or use of incorrect version of the document. Next. We are frequently asked how the onboarding process can be expedited, and it all starts with communication. Next. A specialist is assigned to each new hire packet, so there's only one contact throughout the entire onboarding process for each individual application. They will provide consistent communication to the participant and their team throughout the entire onboarding process. If the team feels that additional assistance is needed, we encourage you to request a virtual meeting with the assigned specialist to review instructions for completion of the paperwork. New participants are encouraged to schedule a one-time in-person meeting for assistance onboarding their first applicant. Next. Upon receipt of the new hire packet, we use the applicant data and payroll form to initiate the criminal background process. A link is sent to the applicant from Paycom, the company we use when processing payroll. The link expires after 6 days, so it is imperative that the applicant completes and submits the requested information as soon as possible. We email the participant and their team when the link has been sent to the applicant. Reminding the applicant to check their email and complete the link will help to expedite the onboarding process. Next. Applicants who apply to work for a minor participant must also complete and submit a separate CPS background application in addition to the routine criminal background. The application and instructions are located on our website. The information must be typed and the application must be notarized. Results can take up to 6 weeks to receive, so it is essential to start this process as early as possible. Next. Once all new hire paperwork is complete, training certifications are confirmed and services are started, a written clearance authorization form is issued to the participant and their team by email. This clearance form includes the date the employee can start working. Please note that applicants are not permitted to start working until the clearance authorization form has been received by the participant and their team. Once received, the employee cannot log hours prior to the official start date provided in that clearance form. We encourage questions and aim to work collaboratively to ensure a seamless onboarding experience. Next. Helpful tools, resources, and forms are located on our website. I have also included a direct link to the new hire packet, as well as the email address to submit all new hire paperwork to. Turnaround time for processing is 4 to 6 days, depending upon the length of time it takes to receive the criminal background results and fully completed new hire documents. Next. We welcome questions at this time, and I thank you.
All right, I'm gonna read out the questions here. Someone asked if the med tech, the CMT training need to be in person, or is there a virtual option, which isn't necessarily related to this. I think it does need to be in person, but I would confirm with the DDA nurse that you're receiving training from, because all nurses that do delegation within the DDA system are required to be trained by DDA, and so they know the details of that. Someone asked if the slide deck will be shared. Yeah, the presentation, the recording of the presentation will be posted, so we could also include the slide deck as a to be able to be downloaded. Someone's having an issue with the form, saying they aren't able to save information in the form, but they are fillable forms and can be saved, so that might be just an issue with that person's computer. And obviously hundreds of people use them weekly. Someone's verifying that for the I-9, a copy of the document being used is not necessary to be maintained by the employer.
It is not, unless they're requiring it of all employees. They have to require it of all employees or not require it of anyone. They do have to see it in person, though. They just don't have to maintain a copy.
Okay. Could you please repeat what form needs to be notarized?
That would be the CPS criminal background application that's on our website.
Yeah, so that's the Child Protective Services check, which is in addition to the criminal background check, and that needs to be notarized and sent to the local Child Protective Services office, and that's only for a staff supporting a participant who's under 18 years old, so 17 years old or younger. When is the employee not considered a new hire? I guess if they've been terminated out of the system and they need to be rehired, then they'd have to go through the new hire process. Is that correct?
Yes, they would.
Okay. Someone said, can you clarify this first aid CPR training? Is it necessary for the first aid portion to be in person?
Yes.
Okay. Someone asked if we're going over this onboarding information because the ARC will be opening to participants. We are going over this because current participants still are onboarding, obviously onboarding staff all the time. I think we have onboarded about 150 staff in the past 2 weeks. So that's a current process, regardless of whether there's new participants coming to services. We don't have information on when we'll be able to accept new participants yet. So, but we will alert everyone as soon as we have information about that. I'm not sure. Someone's saying who would need to do an employee change form? I guess that would be anytime there's a rate change or a service needs to be added to an employee. And there's also if you're doing a rate increase and it's different from what's in the budget sheet, then a new budget modification would need to be completed.
I would just step in there also and say that when you're onboarding an employee, you're listing the service codes that they're going to use in the applicant data and payroll form. You would use a change form to add a service code later on. That would be after an employee has been onboarded, but during the onboarding process, it's the applicant data and payroll form where you would select the service codes that they would use.
Can onboarding paperwork be changed or posted once a year versus different forms being updated randomly so that we get, since we get no notification when changes have been made, this has slowed the process. I guess all I would say is we sometimes find the need to make changes throughout the year. So I would just always, when you're ready to onboard a new employee, I would recommend going to the website and getting the most recent copy of all the forms that have been posted on there. Someone asked, did you say that special tax exemption forms have to be completed annually, even if there's no change in participant's address or live-in caregiver's family member's address?
No. Special tax exemption form only needs to be updated if there have been changes to, I would say, the income tax exemption, which would be whether the caregiver lives with the participant or not.
I believe, well, so the next question is, did I hear you say that the special tax exemption information needs to be done every year? Again, no, but I think what you're saying is the MW 507 needs to be done every year. Is that correct?
If they are claiming the exemption, anyone that claims an exemption has to send updated forms every year to continue to claim that exemption.
Okay, so the federal form and the state form need to be completed each year.
Right.
Someone asked, free certification for CPR and first aid must be in person, or can they get the training online? It needs to at least be hybrid, so some portion of it needs to be in person. Is that correctly?
That is correct.
I thought that I heard that parents who occupy the same home as the participant can always qualify for tax exemption, but I thought that if that is only if parent had owed no state taxes in the prior year. Is that correct?
Can you repeat that?
Yeah, so someone's saying that parents who occupy the same home can always qualify for tax exemption, but I thought that is only if a parent had owed no state taxes in the prior year. I think you can, if the status changed or it's the first time applying, then it doesn't matter what your tax situation was in the previous year, right?
Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Okay. Can you also explain well, I can explain this 7-day stipulation DDA made with employee change forms. Our guidance from DDA is that employee change forms requesting that a rate change be backdated more than 7 days from the date of receipt of the form be sent to DDA for review. So you can send employee change forms requesting a change in the rate from that day forward or from in the previous few days, up to 7 days prior to that form submission. But anything more than that would be reviewed by DDA or is being reviewed by DDA. So I'm sorry, trying to interpret this question, but it sounds like someone's asking for mileage reimbursement if you haven't done it for 3 months. Do we still accept the request? People can turn in mileage. That would be a participant sort of policy on that as the employer. So if someone has mileage that's that far back and they wanted to submit that for reimbursement and the participant agrees and signs it, then that would be okay. Someone asks, what portion of CPR and first aid needs to be done in person for recertification?
The in-person portion is the skills portion. So actually sitting with an instructor in person, doing compressions, and for the first aid, generally they'll have you show how to wrap some kind of injury utilizing the equipment that they give you.
Someone asked, how can I pay an applicant for their time to take CPR if they're not officially hired yet? The answer would be don't think you can. You need to do the onboarding process first, and then they'd be able to log that time in the system. One more time to clarify, employee has already taken first aid virtually and then CPR in person. Is that sufficient, or do they need to take in-person first aid still?
They need both CPR and first aid are considered two separate courses, and each of them have to have an in-person component to them.
Someone's asking a clarified question. So can a participant who occupies the same residence qualify for state tax exemption, even if the parent owed state taxes the prior year? So can a parent who occupies the same, can a parent who occupies the same residence qualify for state tax exemption, even if they owed state taxes the prior year?
So the difficulty of care exemption applies to any caregiver, regardless of relationship, who shares a full-time residence with a participant and has no other legal residence. That person can claim exemption all year long. If you're worried about owing money before, I would talk to a tax advisor, but the difficulty of care exemption applies to parents who are living with the participant and any other caregivers living with the participant full time. They don't talk about any taxes that you owed in prior years. So I would defer to a tax advisor on that.
Yeah, it sounds like maybe, if I'm interpreting correctly, the question they're asking is, perhaps they had another job, or for some reason they owed state taxes in a prior year, and now they're doing this or whatever. And so,
that makes sense. That makes sense.
It's still, you would still qualify for that.
Yes.
You don't have to have never paid taxes, essentially.
Yeah.
Another clarifying question. So are you saying that W-4 form and the MW-507 forms have to be updated annually, even if you were qualifying for special tax exemption due to difficulty of care payments?
Yes.
Someone's saying they're confused about getting reimbursed for CPR and first aid training for a new hire. The onboarding form requires the dates the classes were completed, so it would have to be done in advance. And they don't have a way to pay them for that, I guess. I think as an employer, someone could work out a process for paying someone. I don't know. We'll post something about that to get a better answer, because I think you could potentially pay them a stipend or something to attend a class or something like that. But we can get a better answer on that. Okay, someone's asking again, but I think we already answered. But does difficulty of care exemption require annual submission of W-4 and MW-507? Yes. Someone said the issue is that the W-4 instructions say that you can only claim exemption from withholding if you had no income tax liability in the previous year. Does it say, well, okay. We'll review that and get a clarification. I'm not sure. I think that is one of the ways you can determine if you didn't have withholding, but I don't know that you have to have not had withholding.
Right.
Someone said training hours in your PCP, you could pay for CPR. Yeah. You pay a new hire less than the hourly rate on the budget sheet until they gain more experience. I don't think that would be a problem. If you choose to have a variable, like a pay rate lower than what you've stated on the budget sheet. My impression is DEA is looking to approve pay rates that are, any change in any rate, whether it's a pay rate for an employee or a vendor pay rate or mileage rate. But mostly they're related to increases for that. So someone's just saying that, yeah, so PCP can have training hours allocated for CPR first aid, and then the employees could get paid through that. So I guess that would be like an invoice payment. Someone asked if it would be feasible to have a tax professional attend one of these monthly meetings. We don't give tax advice. So, I mean, we're talking about the forms and everything. If people need advice about tax, we strongly recommend that they seek, seek a tax advisor or a tax professional to get help with that stuff. This isn't advice on who may or may not qualify. It's simply the forms and, how to fill those out. Someone asked, who does the ARC accept for CPR and first aid in person? Do we have a listing for the regional area?
So DDA recommends the Red Cross, local YMCAs, and American Heart Association, but you are open to choose whatever agency you find that offers in-person skills testing. So we have seen people find the training through schools, through fire departments, and other places in addition to the ones that DDA has recommended.
If your new budget increases the pay rate for CDS, do you need to submit a change of rate for a current employee to get the increase? So yes, the way the budgets are, it's not clear if you have multiple staff, like how you want to apply which pay rate and which service to each staff. Some people have a set of staff that only do one service for them and another set of staff that do other services, and they might have different pay rates for that. So you do need to do an employee change form to specify for that employee that you want to increase their rate and in which services you want to do that for and everything. Someone pointed out that the YMCA does not do CPR for general public, only for their staff and volunteers. Someone said that this is unrelated, but we have time. In the past, if a vendor raised a rate for a service, but they were still at or under the rate established by DDA for that service per the current rate chart, we did not have to do a budget mod if no additional funds were needed or change the whole budget to reflect that rate. My understanding is that if you're going to change a rate, even though you're essentially doing a budget mod, because even though there might be money in that line, if the vendor's raising a rate and the rate on which that budget had been developed, so the rate in the budget sheet was at or under the rate established by DDA. So if the budget sheet has a certain rate and the vendor wants to go beyond that rate, or you want to give an employee a rate beyond that rate, you need to have a budget mod for that, because again, even though there may be funds remaining, the budget is based on the rate and you'd want to have that fully funded in there. But also, my understanding is that DDA wants to approve those rate changes because you'd be putting in the notes the reason for the budget mod and explaining that it's due to a rate change and which rates we're changing. There's some sort of miscellaneous comments on employee change forms and stuff, and we will take those into consideration. If someone not working with an agency is a certified first aid CPR instructor, can they teach the class to staff?
They're not certified?
Well, they're certified, but they're not working with an agency. I think they need to issue the credentials through
an
Like,
agency.
They need to be associated in order to issue credentials, even they might be a certified instructor, but so I think they do need to be associated with one of those groups. Someone asked if we have CPR and first aid training. We do not. I mean, we do it for our own employees, but not that large. Someone asked what the new rates for CDS and personal sports are. DDA's rates are posted on their website. I don't know if they've updated the reasonable and customary rates for self-direction, but they posted, if you're asking about the rates themselves, they post those. Someone asked, when does DDA change the max rates every year and what paperwork must be reissued? Normally they would change the rates when there is a increase in the rates, the DDA rates. Typically that's done as a cost of living increase or rate increase annually on the state fiscal year, which means it would start July 1st if there is an increase. But in this year, there's actually a January 1 increase as well. And again, I'm not sure if as recently as a few days ago, they had not changed the reasonable and customary rates on their website yet for self-direction. If the employee has a max rate under DDA guidance, in this case, how can we increase the rate? You can't increase the rate beyond the max rate, but many people have other lower rates and they wish to change those, and that would need a budget mod and an employee change form. If the budget for the current year is already approved by DDA, but you submitted the increased rate form after the fact, when will that rate be in effect? If the budget was already approved by DDA and the budget sheet had a different rate, you would need to do a budget mod to request a change to the rate and to move money into that budget line. Yes, thank you, Brooke. We share your concerns about the budget tool, and we often aren't consulted in this development of that, because we also have ways we would prefer it to be done. That is it. I will give 1 more minute for people. Someone said there's no place to put the rate on the budget mod. I think you'd put it in the notes. I think there's a written section where you put the reason for the budget modification, and DA would expect people to put in there that money is being moved into this category to change the rate from, you know, whatever it is, current rate to the new rate, and list the dollar amount. Essentially, what calculation was used to determine how much money needed to move. Any discussion on including the opportunity to enroll in Paycom access for pay stubs on the new hire packet? Have we? Where are we with that, Lee?
Okay, say that again.
The opportunity to enroll in Paycom access for pay stubs as part of the new hire packet.
So if participants let us know who the employees are who want access, we will grant access. What we want you to do is to submit a ticket with the names of the staff, and we can set that up for you.
Right, and I think they're just talking about whether we could just do that as like a enrollment from the beginning. So we'll look at whether there's a way to add that into our process.
Yeah, sure.
Someone asked the DDA going to issue new rates after the 8% increase for calendar 24. Our expectation would be that they would change the reasonable and customary rates with the rate increase that went in effect January 1st. Thank you, everyone, for the compliments. That's appreciated. Someone asked, what if you don't need more money? Going back to the budget increase, if you used a rate, so on the budget sheet, you use a rate to calculate the budget, essentially the number of hours times the number of weeks times the rate. And so if you're changing the rate, you would inherently need to have more money in that budget line. Now, you may not have used all of the time before. So if you didn't use as many hours per week, say, as you had allocated, so you have excess money in the budget, and you knew that if you increased the rate, it still wouldn't run out of funds, essentially. Our understanding from DDA, though, is that the budget mod is essentially a way for them to approve employee rate changes. So they would say you still need to do a budget mod, I think. And again, I'm not totally clear on their reasoning, so I'm just sort of assuming that. The other thing, though, is you would still want to, because the budget needs to be adjusted correctly, because we want to be able to give you access to the hours you're allotted or approved for by DDA. So if you increase the rate and didn't change the budget, and for whatever reason needed to use more hours, you'd run out of money, essentially, because the rate had increased. So we always recommend prior to having to send budget mods to DDA, we still recommended that people complete a budget mod when they complete an employee change form, so that you have the money in there to support that rate change. Someone asked if we'll notify our employees or employers and employees when rates change via email. I would expect that DDA would notify people, so I'm not sure if we will or not. We'd have to talk with DDA about what their communication plan. Someone asked if they increase Jan 1, will there be retroactive pay? Again, any pay rate change that's retroactive more than 7 days from the date that we receive that form needs to be approved by DDA. So we can't guarantee that. Someone said we're getting ready to hire a new personal support. She works as a personal support for someone else through a DEA agency, and they also use Paycom. Will this cause any problems? No, I don't believe it will, because they're totally separate instances of Paycom, even if they were to work for the ARC Central Chesapeake region in our ARC facilitated services, that's a different instance of Paycom. So that would not create any issues. I think that's about it. So like we said, this has been recorded, so we will post this on the website along with the slide deck. Oh, one more question. Are there plans to update the applicant data and payroll information form so it contains all the current service codes? Right now, it only has about half of the service codes. Yes, we can look at updating that. And we're looking at updating the employee change form as well. Someone asked where they can find the hourly rates. The reasonable and customary rates are on DDA's website under self-directed services, I think. And then there's a bunch of information and stuff. Right. Yeah, it has not been updated. Or are you talking about something that's getting confusing? Sorry. Now it's like we're having individual chats with people. Right. I think you're talking about the applicant data and payroll form in the presentation. Looks more updated than the one on our website. The one, it should be the same as the one on our website, if that's what you're referring to. Spending report on the participant dashboard not matching as per FMCS payment. It's very confusing to determine the correct amount left in the budget. If the spending report in the participant dashboard, well, it says it's not, I don't think that's what they mean by FMCS payment. So the spending report on the dashboard should match the amount left in the budget. There might be activity. We saw one issue where some activity didn't, one like shift or one timesheet for one person didn't display in the spending report, but it was included in the usage. So the usage was correct on the budget tab in participant dashboard. If you do see any issues with that, bring them to our attention. But it's worth noting in the spending report, a lot of them, I think they're still printing out with the previous year's budget as the first section on the spending report. And then you have to scroll past that. And then there's a current year budget. And so some people, at first glance, it looks, you might start looking at it and not realize that it's actually the previous year's budget. We're just working with the vendor to get this taken out. They were including all of it for, I guess, just so we had, everyone can get up to date or whatever. But it's a little confusing, but just scroll down further and you'll see the second budget. But if you believe there are any issues with the budget or the budget usage, just complete a ticket in Zendesk and someone will look into it and reach out to you. Someone's asking what the LTSS rates that are already published for 2024. Again, there's a rate chart in there. It's not as simple. There's a lot of rates for services, so it's not like one rate. Someone said their spending report is incorrect because it's not run for the proper budget period. So I believe we ran the spending reports for for a whole year for people, and then we run them on a bi-weekly basis, typically tied to around when payroll is issued. So, but again, do a customer service ticket in Zendesk if you have a issue with that. Someone asked if we have a date when support brokers will have access to live or nearly live budgets. Will you continue to put out the monthly statements until there's access? We're actually going to release communication. We're going to be stopping the monthly statements because they're causing more confusion for a lot of people, and what is in the participant dashboard is what pay is issued on. And so we want people to be using that, and if they have any issues with that, reaching out to us, because if a budget line in the participant dashboard runs out, it will result in payments ceasing on that budget line. Just note also, if a tax line associated with it runs out, the wage line also won't pay out. So people should be checking in the participant dashboard. And then to the first part of the question about support broker access, we have been asked by DDA to hold off on that. So we're waiting for clarification on DDA on when we should give support brokers access, at what level of access, or whether we should give support brokers access. There's still been some discussion about that. So we're holding off on that until we get guidance from DDA. Same question. Someone said their monthly reports seem accurate for staff, but not for vendor payments. There is a delay in entering some vendor payments, and this was for IFTGS. So those we're working to reduce the amount of time it takes for payments to be entered into the system from when they're issued. We actually issue payments first before we enter them in, and so we're working to redo our workflow so that that should be a more that they should appear more quickly. Normally it's only a week or two lag, but if a payment can't be entered in our system, or if a payment's entered in our system, there are instances in which it could not be charged to the budget for various reasons, like if there is not enough budget information. We normally reach out to teams to get those issues resolved, but until it's resolved, the payment might not actually appear. Someone asked how a sport broker monitors a monthly participant budget. If they don't have access to the monthly reports, they would need to work with the participant to, for the participant could, let them see their access or whatever if they want to share a screen or something like that. Someone's asked about the LTSS, how the LTSS rates are applicable and how you can use them under DA. I think that's a more LTSS rates are the rates that are used to construct the budgets based on the PCP approval. They're used to determine the amount that constructs the total amount of the budget, and the authorization for the hours and all that stuff. But then the budget sheet is what is used to actually build the budget lines for each participant's budget. But the tie-in, there's not a tie back from like payment rates per se. So that's why there's reasonable and customary rates from DDA on pay rates. But it's much more complicated than that. Can a participant get access to Paycom to see payment reports and paid timesheets like they used to? I believe the only access, employees can access Paycom. I don't know that participants have access any longer to Paycom to see payments and stuff like that. Now it's simply used for employees to get access to their tax information and their pay stubs.
We do have the ability to allow access to participants just to view employees' pay stubs. So again, you just place a ticket for that.
All right, there you go. Cool. All right, I don't see anything else in the chat. So thank you everyone for attending today. And we will, again, we're doing these monthly, so we'll be sending out in our next newsletter the topic for our next meeting or our next webinar. And feel free to send us emails if anyone has any ideas for topics they'd like to see as well. We're happy to have input on that. But thank you for choosing the ARC as your FMCS vendor. We'll see you next month.
Thank you.